Hello, BMFox here, and today I would like to talk a bit more about the railroad gun upgrade. I have here with me Freezy and two veteran players. Hello everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Beaker.
Hello everybody.
Hello Freezy, thanks a lot for joining us. How are you?
Yes, no problem. I'm fine. Hope you guys are also fine.
Yeah, I'm pretty much excited to have the opportunity to call with you. Then we also have Mark Achkar. Mark Achkar, you are a player of the Alliance America Euclea that has been several times in a row Alliance World Cup champions.
Yes, correct.
So you are a very experienced player, so I'm very happy to have you here today.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for having this opportunity and to have this chance to discuss about the Call of War and about the railroad gun especially.
You're welcome. And then finally we have General Smith. On Discord he's known as Beaker. He's a member of my alliance. He plays in the Alliance World Cup and also in other tournaments. And Beaker, you have quite an analytical approach to Call of War. Often you use Excel sheets to analyze everything, right?
Yes, well, I'm a scientist by heart, by nature, so yeah, I try to analyze and see what you can squeeze out of a build to see what's possible. There are always, of course, things you cannot predict, what's the enemy doing. But yeah, the basics is that you can, you have the potential, and that's what you can see.
Interesting.
And then, and then you have to adapt in the field.
Well, thanks a lot also to you for being here this evening.
Yeah, no problem. It's a pleasure.
So my first question would be for Freezy. Freezy, you've started with the idea to change a bit the mechanics of the railroad gun and you asked the opinion of the community. A few examples of our ideas were given by the community. For example, making a maximum amount of units that can be produced. For the railroad gun, maybe, I don't know, 10. Other ideas were adding railways, like in Supremacy, or only being able to produce railroad guns in your capital. However, there were some challenges to be able to implement this, and so the devs you chose for the option to make two different levels for railroad guns. Could you a bit explain to us how this was developed?
Yes, sure. So, first things first. We always had this idea floating in the back of our heads that we wanted to actually have a second level of the railroad gun. So this didn't start recently, this was always an idea, because also we saw over the course of the years that users sometimes asked, why can't the railroad gun have two levels? So that's where was our starting point basically, right? And then with all the recent discussions that the railroad gun became a meta unit that everyone builds, this basically sparked our renewed interest in the topic, and where we decided basically that we should do something about it. So since we already had this idea with having two levels, that was our starting point, and that was our initial presentation that we presented to you guys on Discord to ask you for feedback. But then you guys also chimed in and gave your suggestions for different methods how to solve it, right? And that's where the examples that you mentioned, and I can quickly comment on them if you want. So the first thing that you said was having railroad guns only in a limited build capacity, so that you can only produce like 10 per country or stuff like that. That's a neat idea. The thing is though that this is not possible without a code change. So right now we don't have a feature that allows us to limit basically a certain number of units to be built for specific units.
Okay.
Yeah, so I know that some of you guys play con, but the thing is many of the con features are not compatible with the features of the other Bytro games, since the code base is split. So stuff that may work in con may not work in our games, or the other way around. So that's why we can't easily use features from over there, even if they exist. Of course, stuff could be made possible with code changes, but the thing is, whenever we have to touch the code, this is a much longer process than just doing balancing changes. Because programmers have to work on it, they have to stop working on what they are currently working on, and then it has to go through the whole team getting greenlit that this change can be made. Artists may also have to work on it. So we naturally tend to, or try to rather do changes which are easier to do, which don't require as much people to work on, right? And for example, adding this second level is much easier to do, since it only requires a game designer adding this level in our balancing, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. So the other suggestion that you mentioned was
Infrastructure railways, yeah.
yeah, right. So we have this feature in Supremacy, as you mentioned, that railways are required to move a railroad gun. This is technically possible, but it's only possible if the railroad building, in our case the infrastructure, has only one level. Because due to how it is set up in the code, it's not possible to have level 1 unlock the railway feature and then basically to have the other levels increase this railway feature. It's hard to explain, but it basically means it's not possible that the other levels past level 1 still provide a movement speed bonus to units. But we want this movement speed bonus, right? Since it's the incentive to level up the infrastructure. So the two solutions here would be either to do a code change again, so to make it possible, or to reduce the amount of levels per infrastructure to only one level, so that you basically get the full boost with only one level of the building. So this could be a possibility that we could explore in the future. For now, we didn't do that because it would change also the balancing in different ways, right? Since many units benefit from infrastructure, so it could have other implications if we did that change. And the third thing you mentioned was limiting it to being producible only in the capital. So this is a feature that's also possible. We had this feature in Call of War version 1.0 with the commando, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, technically possible. The thing why we didn't want to go that direction because it would set a precedent for this unit, and we don't want to have like an extra behavior just for this unit, because if you think about it, it would then also make sense to limit a lot more units, since other units like atomic bombs, rockets and stuff like that were also rare, so why only railroad guns, right?
Yeah.
And we kind of didn't want to again change so much just for this railroad gun fix. We didn't want to alter the whole game around it, right? So that's also a reason why we rather didn't want to go in that direction. But of course, it remains a possibility in the future if we see that current changes are not enough. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we're only gonna be able to know once we have tested a bit. Mark, what do you think about the upgrades and what this would give for future strategies?
Yes, I think it's very good to have two levels of railroad guns, because currently, like in all tough games, all competition games, even all random games, at some point everyone is just building railroad guns. So we can protect them with some anti-air, and we can give them like armored car for vision. And this is it. You can build many stacks and you can dominate the map. But now, since it is a bit nerfed, and it will be a good idea to have more flexibility to build the new types of unit and other strategies than just mainly railroad guns at later stage of the game. So I think it's good because now we can see maybe new strategies, new plans that are not only relying on railroad guns. Well, railroad gun will still remain a very powerful unit, but now since it's a bit nerfed, the other artillery units are as good as well. So maybe his range will still be a different, but we will definitely see until maybe day 10 or day 12 a lot of strategies and a lot of units different than the railroad gun, which is we are excited about it because now maybe we can have different type of play as well.
You talk about the different types of play. Beaker, how would you use this new gameplay opportunity?
Yeah, well, it's a big nerf that I can tell. Yeah, as a sole player, it will be difficult to implement if you play, for example, World at War. I think it's not that easy to organize that in a team without being vulnerable to other players. But if you are entering as a team of 5 players from an alliance, it will well be possible. And then you have one player focusing on the railroad guns, and if you're a bit close, you can fence him off from the enemy, and he will be pretty much doing railroad gun stacks. That's what I think is going to happen, and other people will likely not be able to pull off this trick.
Okay, so you propose that also players that join a game randomly, the public games, they're not in alliance, they just make a coalition. Also, they could go for the railroad gun strategy, but you are saying that only one player should be able to do it and specialize only in railroad gun to be efficient and to save resources, right?
I think in terms of efficiency, this is the best option. We have seen it in the Blitzkrieg, for example, the tournament. You are together with a team of 1 and 2 players specialize in railroad guns, and that's probably in the case because you still need level 4 secret labs. The cost is It's only 7% cheaper, but the efficacy, the damage it does is reduced significantly. It's down 33%.
Also the speed.
Yeah.
The speed is now quite slow. You can get locked into melee combat way more easily with the Railroad Gun level 1.
Yes, now since we have also 2 level, maybe some players will decide to start the Railroad Gun at level 2. Because now if we build them at level 1, we still need to upgrade them, and we will need a lot of resource to do that. And in order to build them level 1 and 8 and wait to upgrade level 2, it's not an easy job. So I think maybe as well we'll see strategies without railroad guns until we have the levels. And at level 2, players maybe will start spamming them, which is at later stage in the game where we have high level industrial already in the core cities, and some player even expanded and they can afford all this resource, and they can afford also to build the infrastructure in order to move them, especially now that you are talking they are a bit slower than before. So maybe as well some player will not build them at level 1 and wait till they are level 2, which is a bit reasonable maybe in the long-term games.
Okay, yeah, interesting. Freezy, could you maybe tell us what would happen when we want to upgrade the Railroad Gun from level 1 to level 2? Would it work the same way like we upgrade units today? So we would have to pay half the resources of a Railroad Gun level 2 to be able to upgrade?
Exactly, so it works in the same way, and since Railroad Gun level 2 is quite expensive compared to the previous version, you have to pay a lot of resources, of course. So it remains to be seen if this is a feasible strategy. For the rich players probably, for others not so much.
It's also 6.5 hours upgrade time, a bit more even.
That is a lot indeed, and during that upgrade time you can be vulnerable to counterattack.
You're sitting duck.
So you were talking about specializing. That is interesting. What advice would you give to beginners?
I think for beginners it will be difficult because they enter usually solo, and the best thing they could actually do is to start with a team to make sure from a Discord channel, so the official channel, or from our server, to start with a team and then allocate the roles in the team. You need to be sure that you can trust your people. Otherwise this does not work. You need to be able to trade resources freely and be exposed to your teammates, and often in public games that's not possible because there's a lot of backstabbing going on. I would say, yeah, if you don't have a pre-formatted team, then it's going to be very difficult to pull this trick.
Well, deceit is also a form of diplomacy, but sometimes deceit can sting, that's a fact. But yeah, of course, players should look for other players to play together in the official Call of War server or in the BMFox server, because it's just more fun to play together with other players, and it's how Call of War is meant to be played, isn't it, Freezy?
Of course, so if you play together with mates, it's always more fun and also probably easier to play. So always looking forward to play with other people.
What do you think about the idea to have only one player in a coalition that is specializing in railroad guns to make this a more viable strategy?
Sounds very interesting. Actually, I would love if coalitions specialize more in this way, right? For example, you could have one player focusing on aircraft, the other player focusing on tanks, and maybe the third one focusing on railroad guns or other artillery. I think that's creating a very interesting dynamic and a lot of team play, because you have to sync with your teammates, right? When going on the offensive, that you are completely in line with each other and pull together, right? And that's certainly interesting to me also from a competitive viewpoint.
We played a lot of competitive games, even we faced each other in many games and tournament games especially, where it is a team game and all the players are professional players. So basically, yes, as Freezy was saying, we get a dedicated player which will be dedicated in air units, for example. Another player will build armored divisions, while maybe another player will be focused on railroad guns. So basically at the start of the game, maybe everyone can do like a hybrid build to be able to expand, to be able to defend themselves, but basically everyone can be specialized in a type of unit to build this way, because the economy will afford it. Like you will only be building planes, you will have your aircraft factories upgraded, etc. Same for the armored division, same for the railroad gun. So basically in all tournament games, this is what we do. Every player is specialized in some type of units, and this is how we move forward.
Yeah, because then you need only to research one research branch, you only need to construct one type of building, and you can focus your industry in the provinces of whom the resources you need the most.
Yeah, the most important part is that, for example, I will have resources from my teammates, because maybe my teammate doesn't need food while I need a lot of food, so this way also we can spare the resources, share them among ourselves in order to maximize our production. Because, for example, you don't need rare if you want to build, for example, this type of unit, while you don't need food to build the other type of unit. So this way as well, the economy will afford it.
Okay, so the challenge for new players would be to find players with whom they can play together that are approximately in the same time zone, so they can coordinate a bit among themselves. I can imagine, if not, if I would be the tank player and I need air support, it would be kind of difficult if he is asleep.
Well, in the tournaments, as you know, basically we don't sleep. Like when we have really tough games, we can stay like 24 hours, 48 hours. We put alarms, we sleep 1 hour, 2 hours. We call each other if we are under attack. So basically in all the tough games, actually we get no sleep like for 2-3 days until the big battles are either won or lost.
That is pretty hardcore dedication.
I think that's happening, but in starting games it will be more difficult. To what Mark said before, waiting until level 2 in a public game, I think it's not really realistic, because most games are decided at like day 8 to 10, 12 maybe, and that's where one coalition probably gains dominance, at least if there's a good team around. Waiting would not be an option. Either you do it or you don't.
So you would already produce the level 1 railroad guns, Beaker?
I'm certainly going to try once maybe, but yeah, I think it's pretty slow, and I think other tech, I'm not always using it. I'm using a lot other artilleries which are faster, plane based or tank based. Anything can work, but yeah, you just need to be able to face off all enemy opponents or units, and then it does not matter what it is. You don't need the railroad gun specifically, but yeah, if there are a lot in your enemy team, yeah, then it's going to be difficult.
Actually, Freezy, I play a lot of tournament games. So basically in tournament games, you are really facing tough opponents and tough enemies. So basically the game will not end before 20-21 days. And you need like a strategy for the later stage of the game. Because no one can really win a map where you have, for example, 5 teams of pro players. Maybe one team will lose, but the other 4 teams will remain. So in here, maybe I was talking more about the use of railroad gun when they reach level 2 instead of doing level 1 and upgrading. But yeah, it's totally different. Public games and maybe competitive games with pro player all over the map.
What advice would you veteran players give to new players trying to produce railroad guns? Or how could they defend themselves against players that use railroad guns?
Well, they became even slower now, so for the defending part, I would say, yeah, make fast stacks and go around. A country is shredded when you are behind the lines. We always tell it, you need a few runners, and if they get good protection against air, then it's difficult to stop them once you're past the railroad gun stacks.
So you would try to get past the railroad gun stacks and head straight for that secret lab, take it out.
That's what you could do, or you could pinch him in from behind and then lock him in. But yeah, they will be immobile nowadays, because I don't know how much speed they lost, but it's quite a bit.
Yeah, the speed was 25 and now it's only 18, so they've lost 7.
So yeah, it should be more easy to do tank rushes and things like that.
Yeah, when I remade the beginner's guide for Axis, I've started my build with armored cars and light tanks, with then a switch into day 2 to rocket artillery, and then day 4 with railroad guns. I think it's still a viable strategy to do it, but it will be maybe a little more expensive. What do you guys think? Will the strategy change, or should players maybe opt for medium tanks instead of railroad guns to play more efficiently in the early game?
Actually, the Fox in tough games, you cannot ignore the medium tanks or the tank destroyer. In every railroad gun, you will need like a stack of medium tanks or tank destroyers, because especially now with being slower than before, you can easily be catch up. So the only way to defend them, you will really need the tank destroyers or the medium tanks with the railroad guns and with anti-air gun. Yeah, my advice for all players is to use the terrain for their benefit, because now the terrain speed is really important. So the best way is to ambush them. Like what I like to use the most is the terrain in my fights. I really try to pick my terrain where I want the battle to happen, because this will give me the edge. For example, the terrain with armored division, it will give me, if it's flat, it will give me plus 50%, which is a huge, etc. For artillery, I try to use always be on hills or mountain. I do not pick a fight if I don't have the advantage of the terrain. So the best way to do is to ambush these railroad guns, get them somewhere where they are really slow, where you can jump them to reach the other end of the province. They will need a lot of time. You can take the province. Once you take the province, you will have high speed and you can really catch them. And here, of course, you will need like big tanks to hold them, either medium tanks or tank destroyers. once you lock them in melee combat, you will have your artillery behind you, and they can come in and finish the job, or either your airplanes.
Yeah, interesting. Up till now, I only protected my railroad guns with militia, anti-air, and sometimes anti-tank, but yeah, it would be reasonable now to add more heavy armor. Well, I would like to thank you all for your input. Freezy, to conclude the discussion, would you like to add something?
Yeah, so it's exciting, right, that we have an update that changes the game. And our hope is certainly that strategies will change, but we don't intend to make the railroad gun useless, right? It first level got weaker now, but it's still intended to be useful in some situations. So our hope is that some players still sometimes build it, but maybe in other times they decide it's better to use another unit. So we try to have a meta where every unit is useful, and we will see if we achieve that or not. It's certainly exciting to get your guys' feedback on that, and I'm looking forward to also read or hear your feedback once you really played with the unit, because it's one thing to look at the stats and theory craft, right, and it's another thing to really play with it in action, because this really gives you a new perspective. So I'm looking forward to all your guys' comments, and if we see that further adjustments are necessary, we are still certainly open to doing them. This is not a one-time change that will be now for the end of days like that, right? We still have the option to nerf it further, or to even maybe try a different direction if this doesn't work out. So, for example, there was this discussion about the convert feature, which is this whole other idea how to balance them, right? So it's always open what we do, and the game will always change, and it's always keeping it exciting, and yeah, looking forward to your guys' thoughts after you played with it.
Okay, then I have one more question, Freezy.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I was wondering, because it was also played by beta players, huh? And how was it perceived over there, if you can disclose?
To be honest, we didn't get too much beta player feedback,
Okay.
Sadly, which could mean that it's actually that they felt it's fine, so we didn't see a huge outcry. Usually when something is perceived bad, you get much more feedback than when something is perceived good. That's just the nature of things. In that sense, I would say beta test went rather smooth.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for your input. I am for one excited to try those railroad guns in a future video, so like and subscribe and stay tuned for more. Thank you guys, everyone, for participating.
Yep, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Pleasure, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Freezy, Beaker, thank you.
Have a nice evening, everyone. See you guys later.